In this video, we are going to graph equations by plotting points. Keep in mind that the following graphs are not drawn to scale. However, you should have a good idea of the way the graph should look. So let us look at our first problem. We have y is equal to x plus 1 and we want to graph. So we are going to start by writing a table and starting from -3. So -3, -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, and 3. So then we're going to graph plugging in these points. So if I plug in -3, we get -3 plus 1, which is equal to a -2. If I plug in -2, we get -2 plus 1, which is equal to a -1. And if I plug in -1, we get -1 plus 1, which is equal to 0. If we plug in a 0, we get 0 plus 1, which is equal to 1. If we plug in 1, we get 1 plus 1, which is equal to 2. If we plug in 2, we get 2 plus 1, which is equal to 3. And if we plug in 3, we get 3 plus 1, which is equal to 4. Now we're going to take those points and we are going to put them on a graph. So if I draw a graph, I am going to put the numbers -3 to 3 on the graph. So we have -1, -2, -3, and then we have +1, +2, and +3. So our x values go from left to right, and our y values go up and down. So here we have -1, -2, -3 going down, and +1, +2, +3, and +4 going up. Okay, so we go left 3 and down 2. So 1, 2, 3 to the left and down 2. So our first point will go here. Okay, check it off. Okay, so now we go left 2 and down 1. So left 2 and down 1. So our second point will be here. I'm gonna check it off. So now we go left 1 and then we stay at 0. So left 1, stay at 0. Check it off. And then now we stay at 0 and go up 1. So we're staying at 0. We're not going left or right. And then we go up 1. I'm going to check it off. And then we go right 1, up 2. So right 1, up 2. And then we go right 2, up 3. So 1, 2, 3. And then we go right 3, up 4. So right 3, up 4. And then we simply draw our line. And that's actually supposed to be a straight line. Okay. And that is how you do the first graph. Let us look at our second one. So we need to go ahead and plot our x and y values first. So if we say -3, -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, and 3. So if I plug in -3, we get the square root of 9 minus a -3 squared, which is equal to the square root of 9 minus 9, which is equal to the square root of 0, which is 0. Now let's plug in -2. We get the square root of 9 minus -2 squared, which is equal to the square root of 9 minus 4, which is equal to the square root of 5. So let's plug in our -1. We get the square root of 9 minus -1 squared, which is equal to the square root of 9 minus 1, which is equal to the square root of 8. Now let's plug in 0. So we get the square root of 9 minus 0 squared, which is equal to the square root of 9. And we're just going to leave it under the square root so that we'll be consistent with the others. So now let's plug in 1. So we get the square root of 9 minus 1 squared, which is equal to the square root of 9 minus 1, which is equal to the square root of 8. So let's plug in 2, so we get 9 minus 2 squared, which is equal to the square root of 9 minus 4, which is equal to the square root of 5. And for our last one, we plug in 9 minus 3 squared, which is equal to the square root of 9 minus 9, which is equal to the square root of 0, which is 0. Okay, so we have enough points. Now let us graph. So I'm going to write a graph, and I'm going to go ahead and plot my x values. So we have 1, 2, and 3, and we also have -1, -2, and -3. So notice that all of the values that we get are positive values. So we're going to say let this be the square root of 1, the square root of 2, the square root of 3, the square root of 4, the square root of 5, the square root of 6, the square root of 7, and the square root of 8. So at -3, we get 0. At -2, we get the square root of 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And at -1, we get the square root of 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and that is at -1. And at 0, we get the square root of 9. So we need to add one more here. So at 0, we get the square root of 9. And it looks like it repeats. At 1, you get 8 again. At 2, you get 5 again. And at 3, you get 0 again. So we have a graph that looks like this. It's more like a U shape, okay? An upside down U. Okay, and that is how you plot the second graph. Now let's look at our third graph. This time I would actually write the values of y first. So I would do this in reverse, y and x. And I would go ahead and write from -3, -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, and 3. If I were to plug in -3 for y, we would get a +3 for x, because the absolute value of any negative number is a positive number. So then for -2, we get a +2. For -1, we get a +1 for x. And for 0, we get 0, 1, 1, 2, 2, and 3, 3. So that's easy enough. So if I were to graph it, this time I would plot the y values first. So -1, -2, -3, and +1, +2, and +3. And then I'm going to go ahead and write some values for x. So if I were to plug in -3 for y, we get a +3 for x. If I were to plug in a -2 for y, we get a +2 for x. And if we were to plug in a -1 for y, we get a +1 for x. And 0, 0, we get 0, 0 here. And then we get 1, 1. We get 2, 2, and we get 3, 3. So our graph will look like that. And that is how you graph equations, by plotting points. Thank you so much for watching, and always remember that you are awesome.